5 different cameras, 5 different locations, and in every single one, something was already there before the recording began, not arriving, not appearing, not moving into frame, already positioned, already watching. I've reviewed the footage myself, and I cannot find a clean exit from what it shows. A man spent his entire morning at a forest construction site. He thought he was alone. 40 meters behind him, at the tree line, something had been standing there for hours, not wandering, not passing through, positioned, at the exact distance where it would not be detected, completely still, completely silent, watching the machine, watching his movements, and when he finally climbed down and walked away, a trail camera caught what was left behind. He has no idea, right now, today. He is going about his life with no knowledge that footage exists of something standing behind him for hours, that nothing in that region can account for. When that footage was reviewed, researchers found 4 more cases, 4 completely different locations, 4 completely unrelated people. All of them went home. All of them called it a normal day. 5 normal days that were not normal at all. What makes this impossible to walk away from is not what these figures look like. It is what they knew. Because you do not end up positioned that precisely, that consistently, across 5 completely separate locations, unless you have already spent a long time learning exactly where the edge of human awareness ends and staying just behind it. Tonight I am walking you through all 5, not for the shape, not for the size, not for footage quality. What I kept coming back to, every single time, is the behavior. Because when you lay all 5 side by side, one pattern emerges, and the closer you look at it, the harder it becomes to set down. Case 1, Alberta, Canada, January, West Central Alberta. A wildlife research team retrieved a trail camera placed to document wolverine movement through a remote corridor. They had selected that clearing deliberately after weeks of analysis, low human traffic. Pipe 5, consistent animal movement through the area for months going into winter. They chose it because the logic of the landscape pointed them there. 5. Terrain funnels, migration corridors, predictable paths. They expected wolverines. The camera had triggered first recorded event. A buck. It entered the frame moving at a casual pace, paused near a large tree at the edge of the clearing, turned its head sharply towards something behind that tree, and left. Fast, stay with that for a second. The deer detected nothing visible. 5. No shape, no movement, no source it could locate or identify. It registered something at the absolute outer edge of what its senses could reach. And that was enough. An animal whose entire survival depends on detecting exactly that kind of presence, in exactly that kind of environment, not find it. It left anyway. Think about what that means. A deer did not find a threat. It found the absence of information about a possible threat. And that absence alone was enough to make it leave immediately. Whatever was behind that tree understood that. Understood that the goal was not to hide from what the deer could see. The goal was to give the deer nothing at all to resolve. Just enough silence to read as empty space. What emerged from behind that tree after the clearing was empty has not been identified by anyone who has reviewed this footage. But the detail that stayed with me was this. That figure had been pressed against the trunk of that tree for the entire duration the deer was in frame. Not a shift in weight. Nothing that would register as biological presence to a prey animal operating at full alert. The deer searched. Left. 11 seconds after the clearing was confirmed, empty, the figure stepped out. And the terrain matters here. Capnor captures a slope downward. The deer was on higher ground. The figure below already at a terrain disadvantage despite the lower position. Despite what appears to be a partial crouch at the knees, the height estimate lands between 7 and 8 feet downslope. That should not be possible at that angle, but the part I could not shake was something else entirely. The research team chose that clearing because their analysis of wildlife corridors directed them there. They read the terrain, understood the movement patterns, made a calculated decision about where to place that camera. Whatever was behind that tree had made the same calculation, not from data, but plea 5, from time spent inside that landscape long enough to understand it exactly the way the researchers did, just from the other side. The light that morning was flat, overcast. the kind of diffused winter light that strips away the depth cues that help visual detection at distance. No hard shadows, no contrast. Looked once across the clearing in the direction the deer had gone. Then moved laterally along the tree line, staying inside the cover, never crossing into the open ground at the center of the frame. Visible for 11 seconds, then still, what the research team noted in their review logs is worth sitting with for a moment. The path the figure took along the tree line was not random. It followed the lowest point of the terrain the entire way. The path of least visual exposure. The route that kept it darkest against the background for longest. That is not instinct in the way we apply the word to animals. That is environmental awareness, and a deliberate choice about how to move through it. The camera did not record a rare event. It recorded something already mid-routine. K's 2 Provo Canyon Utek 2 hikers on a trail they had walked before. One of them had a camera rolling. Partway through the hike, a shape in the distance. Large, dark, low to the ground near a thick stand of trees at the bottom of a slope. They slowed. Watched, assumed bear, then it stood up. The moment it reached full height, broad-shouldered, covered in dark fur, the footage captures what both of them registered at the exact same instant. This was not a bear, and it was looking directly toward them. What stood out to me in this footage is not the figure itself, it is the distance. From the moment they first spotted it to the moment it stood, to the moment they began stepping backward, the figure did not close the gap once. Not one step forward. It watched them register it, and held. That is not predator behavior. Predators close distance. This was something reading the encounter and choosing its response in real time. Then the hikers began moving back toward the trailhead. At the first bend, the point where the tree line would have cut the sight line completely, they stopped and looked back. The figure was no longer where it had been. It had moved laterally, to a position where it could still see them through a gap between the trees. They had changed direction, it had already adjusted, they ran. Afterward, they described it not as terrifying because of what it did, but because of what it chose not to do. It never came toward them. It just made certain it could keep watching. The gap between them was never fixed. It was maintained, recalculated each time they moved through a new section of trail. When they moved into denser chut and their visible range shortened, the figure had already moved closer to compensate. When they reached open ground with longer sight lines, the figure had already pulled back further into the tree line. It was not reacting to them. It was anticipating them, rating the terrain ahead of their movement and already adjusting before they arrived there. That is not following. Deciding from behind exactly how much of itself they were allowed to detect, and that is a different thing entirely. K's 3 Lake, Ashigan, Canada, September 2024. A canoe trip, 2 friends pulled off to walk a trail branching away from the water. They were far enough in that the lake had disappeared entirely behind the canopy. That is when the sounds started, not animal sounds, knocking. Rhythmic, deliberate, coming from somewhere elevated ahead of them from the hillside where the trees were thickest. One of them raised his camera. The footage shows both of them stopped in the center of the trail, not moving, just listening. Second knock, closer this time. Third, from behind them, 3 distinct positions. None of them visible, none of them closing in. The sounds were not random. When the reviewing team mapped the 3 source positions against where the hikers were standing, they formed a spread directly around them, not scattered noise in a forest. A deliberate ring of sound around 2 stationary people, designed as best anyone can determine, to produce a response without revealing how the target reacts tells you something, whether they move toward or away from a sound source. How quickly. Whether they split apart or stay together. Information. Gathered without ever showing itself. Approximately 30 meters back, too tall to be a deer. Too still for wind movement. Holding position in the tree line from the direction they never turned toward. Neither hiker saw it. They were focused forward trying to identify the sounds. That shape does not move for the entire duration of the recording. Already watching, from the direction they never turned toward, I kept thinking about the sequence when I reviewed this case. The sounds started after they had walked deep enough in that the trail behind them was no longer visible. The moment they lost a clear exit route was the moment the sounds began. That timing is either coincidence or it is not. The hikers did what most people would. They listened, felt uncertain, decided to leave. They walked out of that forest believing they had been in an unusual but empty place. The shape in the upper left corner of the frame was there the entire time. KK4 Pacific Northwest Trail camera, mounted 10 feet up a tree. 5 elevated deliberately to stay outside the natural sightline of ground-level animals. The figure that appeared in the frame was at the camera's elevation, not on the ground at 10 feet, looking directly into the lens. The detail that bothered me was not the figure. It was the 17 minutes before it appeared. Tree trunk, narrow slice of forest floor, flat gray light. Nothing then the figure, already there, already at the lens, already looking back. No entry captured, no arrival, no transition from anywhere else. Or it understood exactly where the detection boundary ended and came in from outside it. The reviewing team noted something in the technical logs that I could not move past. The position the figure occupied is the exact location from which someone can examine that specific camera model without triggering its motion. Sensor. That position is not something you find by walking up to a tree and looking around. You find it by testing, approaching. I'm 5 triggering the sensor, backing off, adjusting the angle degree by degree, doing that over and over until you have mapped where the boundary ends. That is not instinct. That is a process. That takes time and intention. Then the reviewers noticed something worse. The timestamps did not line up. Between minute 9 and minute 13, the file simply stops existing, not static footage. Not black frames, nothing. A gap in the data itself. They logged it as a possible firmware error. Possible the figure held position at the lens for approximately 4 minutes once it appeared. Did not move, did not turn away. Did not react to anything behind it, just stayed at the lens. What it was doing during those 4 minutes is a question I kept sitting with long after I finished reviewing this case. Not moving, not displaying. I5, not startled and frozen, looking. In a way that suggests it understood something was looking back, 4 minutes missing from the log. 4 minutes at the lens, then gone. No departure event. The frame returned to the same tree trunk and the same flat gray light as if the last 4 minutes had simply never existed. I have not found a way to make that coincidence sit still. Case 5 British Columbia solo camper. Chilliwack River Valley. 5 A region with a long record of unusual reported activity going back several decades. First night was quiet, then around 11 p.m. footsteps. Circling the tent. Not approaching, not retreating. Circling, he stayed inside and recorded audio until the sound faded. He did not go out. In the morning, he searched the perimeter in daylight. He found prints in hard-packed gravel, a surface that barely holds a clean impression even from a heavy boot. He placed his own foot beside what he found. He wears a size 12. The print was significantly larger in every dimension, heel defined. 5 toes clear. Consistent spacing between each step. 1 foot after the next. 5 bipedal, upright, not a drag mark, not 4-point contact, 1 foot. Then the next, he found something else near the camp entrance. The previous evening, he had stacked 3 flat stones as a personal trail marker near his tent, deliberately balanced. Something he described as a habit on every solo trip he takes. The top stone had been removed and placed on the ground beside the stack. The 2 stones beneath it untouched. Not knocked over, not scattered. The top stone lifted away carefully without disturbing anything beneath. He moved into his vehicle for the second night. Around midnight the knocking started. 2 strikes against a tree. A pause. 2 more. 5 The audio is in the footage. What it produced against that trunk registers, not as tapping but as a heavy concussive impact. The kind of sound that requires significant mass and intention behind it. He packed out the following morning and has not returned to that valley since. The part I could not shake about this case is not the prints or the circling or the audio. It is the rock stack. He built it as a personal marker with no external convention behind it. Something found it, examined it, made a decision about the top stone specifically, and removed it carefully without touching what was underneath. There is something about that detail that does not sit comfortably alongside the other explanations people reach for in cases like this. A bear does not lift a stone and set it down. Wind does not sort between stones. Whatever did this understood that the stack was a constructed thing. Something placed with intention, and it chose to interact with the top stone only, as if responding. I5, as if acknowledging that something had been left there. That is not accidental contact with an unfamiliar object. That is a considered interaction with something and a deliberate choice about how to respond to it. The close 5 people. 5 normal days that were not normal at all. Alberta held completely still inside cover until the clearing was confirmed empty. Moved only when detection had become impossible. Provo Canyon assessed the encounter from a fixed position. The moment the hikers changed direction, never advanced, never fled. Managed. Lake Ashagan produced 3 coordinated sound positions, forming a ring around 2 stationary people. A figure already placed in the tree line before either of them turned around, Pacific Northwest at camera elevation. I'm 5, outside the motion sensor boundary, 4 minutes missing from the log. 4 minutes at the lens, British Columbia circling without approach. A rock stack with the top stone lifted away and set carefully beside the rest, in every case no arrival captured. B5 no entry event, already there, already operating. Already in position before a single sensor registered anything at all. These are not isolated anomalies that happen to share a surface resemblance. They are the same behavior expressed through 5 different environments using 5 different methods, the same decision-making, the same awareness of boundaries, the same consistency of outcome. One mind running the same program across 5 locations, you can dismiss 1. Find an exit for 2. 3 is where the comfortable answers start running short, is something else entirely. The only way behavior becomes this precise across 5 unrelated locations, 5 different people, 5 completely separate environments is repetition. Long enough to learn where a motion sensor ends. Long enough to understand what a deliberately stacked object means and how to interact with it without leaving obvious evidence. Can detect and adjust for it in real time as the terrain changes. The research team went into that Alberta clearing looking for wolverines. They chose that location because the logic of the landscape pointed them there. Something was already there. Had already made the same calculation from the other side. Had already been returning to that clearing long enough that nothing about being in that position required any adjustment at all. The trail the hikers walked in Provo Canyon, the lake trail in Ashagan, the campsite families returned to every summer. The forest path walked alone on a quiet afternoon, believing the day was entirely theirs. All of it the same space. 2 entirely different sides. One side aware it is being observed. One side with no idea at all. They recorded the space where nothing was supposed to be. And what has learned to exist inside that space for this long, without once being clearly seen, does not need to be visible often. Only correctly. Somewhere tonight, another camera is pointed at a clearing that looks completely empty, and something may already be standing just outside the frame. Subscribe, hit the bell, see you next time.